To introduce tonight's speaker, I know him well. At least I hope so. So this is Rabbi Goldstein. He's also known as Rabbi Red. And he is the director of the Chabad of West Houston and the Houston Friendship Circle, and also associate director of Chabad Outreach. He originally comes from a little shtetl in South Texas near the Mexican border called McAllen, Texas. He got his rabbinical ordination in the Central Chabad Yeshiva in Kfar Chabad, Israel, and he has been in the part of the Houston Jewish community since 1998. During that time, he was appointed and he serves as the lead consulting rabbi of the Texas Department of Criminal Justice since 2005. And he's also been the Jewish chaplain at the federal prison in Beaumont since 1998. Part of the rabbi on staff at Harris County Jail, and at other institutions that are visited are the Richmond State Supported Living Center and the Menninger Clinic. He is married to Mrs. Lisa Goldstein, and he has 5 children. They're really cute. Sima, Avrami, Chaya, Zolmi, and Rosie. So that's a little bit about him.
Yeah.
And now I have a son-in-law, Ariel. I have to update the slide. Okay. All right. So. All right. So now, I just read to you that I was born in a city called McAllen, Texas. And I promise you that I never really walked into a jail my whole life. Right? If I did anything, I didn't inhale. That's just a joke. Okay. Anyways, the only time I did go to jail was I was part of the Cub Scouts. And one of the outings was to the McAllen City Jail. And it was like one little cell. I remember them taking us to that cell. And I probably thought at that point, I'll never go to a prison again. As they say in Yiddish, a Mensch tracht und Gott lacht, which means a person makes a plan and God laughs, right? God says, oh, you're going to go to jail. And he sent you there for many years. So anyhow, through the journey of life, I went to Chabad yeshivas, Los Angeles, in Canada, in Venezuela, Israel, in Brooklyn. And I always had friends that were going sometimes in the summer to visit prisons with a famous Chabad organization from Miami called the Aleph Institute, which I'm affiliated with, that they oversee all the inmates all around America. They also deal with the American servicemen and the armed forces and make sure that they have religious supplies. So I knew that prison was part of the campaigns that we as Chabad rabbis do, or rabbinical students do as well. However, it never really talked to me too much. Then after I got married, I was looking for where am I going to end up? And I had a few different job offers: Los Angeles, Dallas, Caracas, and Houston. And together with my dear wife, we chose Houston, Texas. Part of choosing Houston, Texas, when I first came here for the first 13 years, I worked directly and under Rabbi Moshe Traxler from Chabad Outreach. He told me that part of my work will be to go visit the prisons. And I never went to prison in my life. So I'm like, okay. But in Chabad, we have this motto: if you want to learn how to swim, you jump into the deep end first. That's how we do it. So he took me to a prison. It was in 1998 in August, and it was not a light prison. You know, we always heard as rabbinical students, there's something called a camp. What is a camp? Camp is where the white-collar criminals go, and it's very lax. It's not that like the Green Family or Young Judea is like that, but there's like buildings and there's no fences, and people are just kind of doing their thing. But that's not where I went. First time I walked into prison, it was the United States Penitentiary at Beaumont, which is the highest level of security, which has what's called controlled movement, which basically means if I need to get from here to there, there's like 3 gates along the way that open and close. And the reason for that is because if there would ever be a riot or something breaks out, they're able to lock everything down and it won't spread all over the place. Everything will be contained, lesser numbers in different spaces. So I remember walking in the first time and I see two inmates that are sitting there. One inmate looked like a hippie. He had like a long ponytail that was nice and braided. And the other one was like this bald head guy who looked really interesting. Like he'd make a lot of like movements with his head and blink his eyes a lot. Rabbi Traxxas told me, we have a golden rule in prison. You shouldn't ask a person why he's here for, and you shouldn't ask them how long he's here for. So I'm like, okay. And I'm like, okay, Rabbi, so I'm just going to follow your lead and I'm learning. It's my first time here. And I'll never forget. He says, I want to introduce you to the new Rabbi, Rabbi Goldstein, who's here. It's his first time visiting, and we're going to have him speak to you now about the upcoming Jewish holidays. And I remember I felt like the deer in headlights. I'm looking at these inmates. What am I supposed to do with these guys? They don't look like the kind of people I usually hanging out with. I don't even know what to talk to them about. So I remember I gave them a little lesson about the month of Elul and Rosh Hashanah and getting ready for the new year and Teshuvah. Spoke about it this past Shabbat here. And yeah, they all nodded their heads. Afterwards, I asked Rabbi Traxxas, so what's the deal with these two people? He said, well, one of them, he had an LSD lab in his house, and it was a whole big deal. And the government, and they busted him, they gave him like 30 years, and there was some government conspiracy. And I'm like listening to all these words. I'm like, okay, it sounds pretty crazy. And what about the other guy? The other guy, he was a contract murderer. I'm like, okay, what does that mean? He says, yeah, he was paid to kill somebody, but you see, he must have killed either a federal employee or somebody that works for the federal government, and that's why he's in the federal jail. So I'm like, oh, thanks for telling me after the fact. We have to find out before. So then after I walked out, Rabbi Traxxas said, you did such a good job, Rabbi Goldstein. Now you're going to go to the camp by yourself. So I'm like, oh, my goodness. So, but I did it. I persevered. We were good. And then on the way home, Rabbi Traxxas said, look, you did a good job. I'm not going back to Beaumont. It's your job now. So every month from that point going forward, I started going to Beaumont. Then all of a sudden, that's in August of 98. In, let's say, like right before April of 99, there was a senior rabbi from Houston who calls me on the phone. Some of you might have heard of him. His name is Rabbi Ted Sanders. He called me on the phone and he said, I hear that you're visiting prisons. I said, yes. He says, well, I'm the state rabbi for the Texas Department of Criminal Justice. I'm like, oh, cool. You want to come over into my house? Let's meet. Okay. So I went over to his house and we were just kibitzing, and he liked to tell a lot of jokes. So, and then he gave me his book of jokes afterwards. and anyhow, he said, you know, I'm getting a little old, and right now I've been visiting like 4 prisons in the Houston area. I decided I want to give you 2 prisons to go to. So you're going to go to the Huntsville region. I said, Huntsville, isn't that where they put people to death? He says, yeah, but you're not going to death row. You're going to go to where they kill them. It's called the Walls Unit. And then you're going to go to this other place in a place called Love Lady, Texas. You know where Love Lady, Texas is? In Texas, they use the terminology. I'll Yiddishize it a little bit. It's west of Yushka, they say. Wherever Yushka is, go west, and that's where you'll find it. Which means in Yehuditville, the middle of nowhere. So, and I remember, and it was very different experience in the federal jail, because the first unit I went to was actually that was called Love Lady, Texas, I forgot whatever, the East Ham unit it was called then. And there was no air conditioning in the unit. And it was April time, so a little warm. And I remember I walked into the chapel, and the chapel also didn't have air conditioning. It had these big fans. And I remember talking to the inmates, and after like 20 minutes of talking to them, I'm starting to doze off. I don't know if you've ever been in a hot room. It's very humid, and these fans are just blowing the hot air, and you're trying to talk and project your voice. And you're like, hey, it was a very interesting experience. That group of inmates, there was actually like 1 or 2 Jews out of like 10 that were in that service. And the head of the community was a real good Louisiana last name. His last name was Thibodeau. Very Jewish last name, right? He was a Cajun Jew. So he was the head of the group. And after the service, the chaplain sits me down and he's like, Rabbi Goldstein, I need your help with something. This guy appointed himself as the head of the group, but he's into some fishy business. I said, what is he into? So he shows me some of his requests. What was one of his requests? The upcoming holiday of Passover is coming. So what we need is that the kitchen should give us a lot of food, and we need to be able to take the food into ourselves, because then we pray over the food, and that's how we kosherize the food. So I'm looking at this. That's a good joke. And yes, I fired him. And then I made one of the Jewish people the person. And then I started saying, you know what? The life of an inmate is very interesting, because I don't want to say like these bold blanket statements, but you're going to hear some kind of sharp things. I find that a lot of people that are in the prison system do suffer from some level of mental illness. And unfortunately, many of them, it wasn't dealt with properly, and it just festered and became whatever it became. And many of them are just not able to control themselves. Sometimes people, they think they're somebody and they're really somebody else. A lot of con artists, a lot of sociopaths, a lot of crazy stuff going on. So then you think to yourself, so why in the world would I want to take my valuable time from dealing with the community and go to such a place like prison? So as I started off the speech, I am a Chabad rabbi. And Chabad rabbis get their inspiration from the teachings of our dear rabbis. And the Rebbe actually spoke about prison a couple of times, many times, and helped to establish the Aleph Institute. So I put a little quote. There's a picture of me getting $1 from the Rebbe back in October of 1990. And over here, I just want to zero in over here. What was the Rebbe's perspective in regards to prison? So he says, according to the Torah, a person was put on this earth for a purpose. Withholding one's ability to achieve that purpose is the most inhumane treatment he can possibly suffer. We're responsible to make sure that criminals are helped in their lives, rehabilitating them to a productive life in a moral and just society. We must ensure that prison acts not just as a punishment, but as an opportunity for positive growth. So when you familiarize yourself with the Rebbe's vision of how we should do outreach with all types of Jewish people, including inmates, so it becomes part of the way you think. And then all of a sudden, I don't just see that inmate as a crazy criminal, but I'm able to see that, oh, it's a neshama, it's a soul that got lost somewhere, ended up in this place, and they have to be, there's divine providence. They have to have some sort of a reason that they are where they are, outside of just punishment. And it's up to me to help rehabilitate them through spirituality or through Judaism, as we say. The next video I want to show you, there's this clipping. This is the head of the Aleph Institute. He passed away this year. His name is Rabbi Lipsker, very famous Chabad rabbi from Bell Harbor, Florida. And he describes the first time he had brought a group of inmates to New York. So, okay, look at me. What do you mean? How can you take an inmate to New York? They don't do it in the prisons anymore. There used to be what they call furloughs, where they would give the inmates a weekend off. But it had to be a pre-approved plan. It wasn't just like you go party for the weekend and come back to jail. No, it was like a whole, you had pre-approved kind of program. So he had developed this concept, okay, we're going to take these inmates from the Miami area, and we're going to bring them for Shabbat to Crown Heights. And he did that. They were federal inmates. They weren't like the real dangerous ones. They're more like white-collar criminals. And your grandfather actually came down to the Fabregan, and he asked, where is this Rabbi Lipsker? Come over here. And so the Rebbe's secretary told this rabbi that the Rebbe doesn't want to come down until these inmates spread out in the crowd. Why? He doesn't want the inmates to all be together, because he doesn't want that people should just be, focused on them, and then they're going to start feeling shame that, oh, maybe they figured out we're inmates, this and that, whatever, because they look a little bit out of place. So they all shuffled, and then Rabbi Groner went up to the Rebbe and told him he can come down. The Rebbe came down, and he started talking. This actually was the holiday of Shavuot of this particular year. And so
at that Fabregan, the Rebbe gave a talk. It was Shabbos of Shavuot, And Rabbi gave a talk about the first chapter in the book of Ezekiel, which is the toughest chapter. It's called the Ma'aseh Merkava, the vision. And he talked about the rabbis. And he said the rabbis, usually they sit on their laurels. You know, you got Smicha 20 years ago, so you got to do it again and learn. And he kind of laid out the rabbis, because it's time when rabbis come. And he started talking about the prisoners. Same thing. And he said, there's a big question here. God loves us. He says prison is a exile within exile, triple exile. Why? First exile is the soul and the body. Already it's exile. The soul does a big challenge to live in this animal. The second challenge is exile. We're in Golos, a world where we're under the jurisdiction of nations. Third exile is prison. It's such an exile that you don't even have to put him as a... That's how big of an exile it is. So how does Hashem send his people to go into such darkness? Because their objective of Golos is to save the sparks, to collect the energies that are here. So how did God send his beloved children? It says as follows. It's not a simple person that has to go to that space. Only very special neshamas, very souls, that Hashem has endowed with the ability to go into absolute abstract darkness, and to not only not get underscored or overwhelmed by the darkness, but to transform that darkness to light. That's the special people in this system.
So I've shared this lesson with the inmates numerous times through all the years, and it's something that empowers them, because they're depressed. They're in a very dark place. But all of a sudden, you're kind of refocusing them, readjusting them to see that got to change your attitude. As of now, you're God's emissary in the darkest place. So you have to make sure that you can bring light over here. And by the way, when you bring light over here, it doesn't just affect you here. It affects the whole world. Because mitzvahs, it's not like, okay, the light, the beam of light just going to come on me right here. So the beam of light of God comes into me and into the whole world, and it shifts the balance of light over darkness and really affects the world in the most positive way. So there's a great benefit in getting inmates to do mitzvahs in the darkest places known as prison. Okay, so that was just a very inspirational thought that I wanted to share with you. Next. So now, I'm going to start talking about how many inmates there are in the prison system, and to discuss the kind of community that we have in prison. So at this point, I'm only going to specifically focus on what's called TDCJ. TDCJ means the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, and it's the state prison system. And so there are around 157,000 inmates in the state of Texas. 157,000 inmates spread throughout the whole state. For the 157,000 inmates, take a guess. How many people, first we're going to ask two questions. How many identify as Jewish? And how many are, well, when I say Jewish, I'm using very broad Jewish. Either one of their parents are Jewish or they converted. So how many identify as Jewish? Well, give me a number. Oh, I'm sorry. 800. Imagine 800 inmates decided that they're Jewish, and they changed their travel cards, which means it's their identification, and they are labeled "You are Jewish." Okay. Now, from those 800, there are only between 50 and 60 at one time that are Jewish or Jewish that are in the system. Okay. So, what's the discrepancy? Why the 800? Why the 50 and 60? What's going on over here? I always love telling this story. It didn't happen in the state of Texas. It happened in the state of Washington. And so let's say you're an inmate in jail and you don't have any money. So how can you make money in jail? You really can't. It's very difficult to make money. Legally, at least. Illegally, it's easy to make money because you get drugs somehow and you're bartering contraband. But legally, how could you make money? So the easiest thing is to create a lawsuit for the state, and then the state will have to settle with you if you make a strong point, and then you get damages, and then you get like $20,000, $30,000 in your bank account. Okay, so now inmates that are a little clever realize if I'm going to choose a religion that has a lot of rituals, I'm going to choose Judaism. Why? Because Judaism has something known as the Code of Jewish Law that tells you how to do everything and anything from the beginning of the day to the end of the day, every holiday, and so on and so forth. So if I take a book to the administration, say, this is a law book called the Jewish Law Book, and I want you to look inside. It says, I need this, and I need this, and I need this, and you're not giving me this, and you're not giving me my rights. I'm going to go to the Supreme Court. And sometimes the state buckles and says, you're making a good point, but let's settle. Okay, fine, let's settle. $20,000. Have a nice day. So what happened in Washington State? Nobody blushed, okay? So this is the story. The guy found somewhere in one of the Jewish books that if you're going to be intimate with your spouse, Shabbat is a very holy time to do it. So he brought a case to the state and said, I need to go home every Shabbat, every weekend to be with my wife. It's a mitzvah. It's here in the book, right here. Fringe benefits of being a Jew, right? I'm going to go and yeah. And it actually made it into the courts, but thank God a judge threw it out and said that applies for a free person. You're not free, so so they threw the case out. But you see, this is the mentality of an inmate of what they try to like weasel in to sometimes benefit themselves. But of course, that person isn't Jewish. All right, so why would somebody want to convert to Judaism? I just gave you the well. So in the state prison system, let's talk about why would somebody want to be Jewish in Texas. So in addition to the days off of the federally mandated holidays, you also have what's called religious work prescription days. Judaism has many of them. Rosh Hashanah, 2 days, Yom Kippur, 1 day, Sukkot, those first two, the last two, and all the major holidays, you get a day off. Then you have Passover. And Passover, I always would say that like the cockroaches come out of the closet. It's crazy. Because a month before Passover, all of a sudden everybody wants to be Jewish. 'Tis the season. Why? Because the rabbi's coming to jail with matzah and macaroons. Do you know what the value of a Mani Shevet's macaroon is in prison? You could turn the whole world upside down with one Mani Shevet. And a matzah, we're like, oh, matzah, gewalt. But by them, matzah, you can get like 10 bags of coffee for one little piece of matzah. It's amazing what you could do with a sheet of matzah. Maybe we could solve all the world problems. We just have to be bartering matzah all over the place. But anyhow, so this is what happens. So a lot of people decide, okay, it's a good benefit to be Jewish. Then, as you'll find out a little later tonight, we opened up a kosher kitchen in one of the prisons. And so then they're like, oh, the Jews have good food. And we do have good food. I promise you, it's much better than the rest of the food because the non-kosher meat that they serve in the prison system, a lot of the meat has a lot of filler in it. Like you see, they have these tubes of ground meat. The ground meat is like about, I would say, maybe 50%, 60% meat, and a lot of percentage of soy product or other things to expand the meat. But by us, it's kosher chicken and kosher meat, and then so I get donations for the inmates. And so today I just got a list for Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah is coming. So what are we bringing to the inmates that they're going to make in the kosher kitchen? A 40-pound brisket, 10 pounds of honey, bags of apples, this, that, challahs, grape juice. They're going to have a whole massive meal. Tzimmus, you name it, they got it. So if you're a Texas boy and you want to get some of those fixins, you got to become Jewish, right? Anyways, I could go on with other jokes, but now's not the time. Okay, so that's a little bit of what's going on. So now.
So what's the enamelment with matzah? I mean, brisket, I get it, right? But matzah.
They call it the matzah crackers. I don't know. Like I had like the most Texas person stop me, Rabbi, you got one of them matzah crackers. And I'm like, you like that stuff? Heck, I love that stuff.
Really Jewish out of everyone?
Uh-huh.
They're only really 50
Yeah, in the state prison. 50 to 60. Okay.
When Rabbi Sanders told me the first time I went with him for Passover, he said anything from the outside is valuable. Anything they don't get in prison,
Right.
is valuable.
And macaroons though are because they're sweet, and it's matzah. Listen, in those days they used to allow the top gefilte fish cans, but that became illegal because you could cut somebody with it. Okay. Anyways, a day in the life of a prison rabbi. So now I'm going to take you. So what do I do? So first of all, I want to show with us here. This is Rabbi Dan Gordon. We've been friends for all 27 years that I've been here in Houston, and for many years he's come with me to visit the prisons many times all around, so he can vouch and talk about it himself. What's a day of a life of the prison rabbi? So I walk in usually into a chapel, into a room where there is either 10 to 20 inmates, and generally I present a Torah class which is full of, I call it Hasidus, but it also has a lot of psychology. And the whole point of the message is to try to uplift them, to give them some hope till the next visit. Then I have to field their complaints. And then sometimes I have what I call, it's like I go into my booth, confessional booth, which is my office in the back. And then one by one, they come in and start telling me their problems. And I play their psychologist for like 15 minutes, 20 minutes, try to help them out. And then the next one comes in. And so this is what I'm doing when I'm in jail. So over there, this is.
Somebody's stalking you, or you safe?
No, I'm safe. Don't worry about it. I know karate. I have black belt. Anyways, so this is me a few years ago when I was a little lighter. That's the only mezuzah in the whole Texas prison system. Yes, Rabbi Lipsker says a prison in general is patur from a mezuzah, but I have an office in one of the prisons that this is the office over there. This is an inmate with me and in the books. It's like a Jewish library there, and we put a mezuzah there. So there's one mezuzah in the whole prison, Texas prison system. I used to hold the services in the law library, where I have the material in my hand, lecturing to the inmates. Put on tefillin with the males. I'll talk about the females in a few minutes because I know someone's gonna ask. And then here's like a more recent picture of me just talking, taking it, as they say, with the other inmates, and they're all sitting and listening to me. Probably saying a joke to them, that's why they're all smiling and laughing. Not too inspiring, but anyhow. And this is inside of the chapel at Stringfellow. And the whole point is to try to give them a little bit of chayus, some excitement until the next month, and try to rehabilitate them to the best of our abilities. Now, here's a video, and I want to just give you some background on this. This video was taken a few days after October 7th, 2 years ago. What happened then? A few days after October 7th, Texas executed a Jewish inmate. The day after Simchas Torah, I went to death row to put on tefillin with him and say vidui with him. It's the second time I've had to do that. And I wasn't present at the execution. And there was a question if he was going to be executed or not. And then at the last minute, they canceled the turnover and they said, oh, it's on. And they schlepped him into the execution chamber, and at 9:30, the lights out. So the next morning, I had to go into prison and just uplift the inmates. We're coming from the Jewish holidays, but it wasn't a normal Jewish holiday. Simchas Torah, right after October 7th. And the execution was just a few hours before. So I was like a little bit dazed. But that's just a little bit of a background into this video. Watch for just a few moments.
Not a lot of people want to work in a prison.
A lot has gone on in the last week, and last night the state executed a Jewish inmate by the name of Jedediah Rashid. When that inmate is on death row, it's my second time doing this. I make sure that in addition to saying we'll be doing confessional prayer with them, I also make sure to give them a hug to make them physically feel that they are cared for and that the community is praying for them. There is sitting in prison, and then there's being executed. executed jumps a line.
Texas doesn't care.
No. It's a big problem. And when you see it, it hurts.
Yeah, but the Supreme Court doesn't do anything to fix it either. They're allowing this stuff to happen.
Yeah, but there's different pieces here. You have Supreme Court, and you have State Court, and the technical state guidelines themselves can fix this. You wouldn't have to worry about it.
I don't think I understand this.
I know you don't say it's a big problem. And when you see it, it hurts. It hurts because you see something's broken.
I'm living it. You don't have to tell me.
I'm not saying to light you up. I'm just saying you that
You don't have to tell me I'm living this. I know what Texas.
Thank God you're allowed. That's the thing.
Well, it's a debate. Stuck in a cell.
In chaplaincy, I come across many different types of people. I do have a percentage of non-Jews that participate. I like to make things as inclusive as possible. And the whole message is tailored to be more universal, is to become disciplined with yourself. Don't let your impulses drive you.
Okay. Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, go ahead.
Question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Was that a conversation you were having, and this is what they were upset that you were?
Yeah. That was unscripted. That I didn't like come in with these are my lines. As I explained to you, I was like, I would call it a little bit of emotional distress about everything that was going on the last few days. And here I'm having that, and there's another video of me that the guy is videoing me in the car, and I'm talking to the guy's girlfriend of the one who was executed, trying to lift her up when her boyfriend got killed the night before. And so here I'm walking in, and then I get this one inmate, Doc, as you know, and I'm saying, hey, it was a piece of work on his own. You can watch 60 Minutes and see what he did. And he's like boxing up with me, you know. But it's okay. I handled it all right. Anyways, but that's real life, guys. That's what goes on. Anyway, so what goes on? Do the inmates practice their Judaism? Are they allowed to? Does the state allow it? So thank God there was a religious institutionalized act that came to be during the presidency of Bill Clinton. And on that, many religions have been able to kind of have everything they need, and they're protected. So while all that was going on is when we established the Enhanced Jewish Program. The main program is in one prison in the whole state called Stringfellow, which it's in a place called Sharon. That's a picture of me lighting menorah with them inside of the chapel. There's the only kosher sukkah in the state prison system. All 20 some odd inmates eat their meals through the holidays Sukkot there in this sukkah in the prison system. And
in what month?
This is in Stringfellow in Sharon, Texas. Sharon is down 521, like past Pearland, right after Pearland.
Let my people
Passover and prison. What's the connection? If you're Jewish and serving time, it's a big deal.
Ultimately, we all get tested, and many of us fail. The difference is these people got caught.
Following Jewish laws isn't easy. Try that in a prison cell. A whole other story.
When I first came into the system, they took basically all my religious, what they call paraphernalia. They told me I wasn't allowed to have it.
Since then, a lot has changed. The Stringfellow unit in Rosharon caters to the largest group of Jewish inmates in the system, about 25 inmates of approximately 60 in the state.
Now we're kosher for Passover.
Including a kosher kitchen. No easy task, considering they practically have to burn the place down.
There are many rituals that are necessary in order to be observant in the Jewish faith. And one of the major points is to have a kosher diet.
To keep kosher at one point in time was you'd come through and you say, oh, hey, I'm pork free, and they would give you an extra scoop of beans with your meal, and that was your meal, beans and whatever vegetables you happen to eat.
Do the crime, do the time. What do they expect?
We're still human beings, and many of us want to better ourselves, and one of the best ways to rehabilitate oneself is through religion.
So this small group of inmates sits behind bars and will celebrate Passover.
Matzah, don't leave home without.
A holiday representing freedom from slavery in ancient Egypt.
It's not so much about literally walking out of Egypt. It's about overcoming the obstacles you have in your way and recognizing what your obstacles are, your personal obstacles, and working towards rectifying that.
Let my people go. Oppressed so hard they could not.
So I call it the bar mitzvah on death row. So here's the story. Once upon a time, it was in 2013, I got a phone call from a person who was a law student, and he was working on the Innocence Project, which is a project that's against the death penalty. And he told me, Rabbi, there's a Jewish person on death row. And I said, there isn't. That there is. I said, I know, you're going to tell me about such and such a person. I know he wasn't really Jewish, that guy. Not even our friend, somebody else. So he's like, okay, so who is he? So he tells me his name. His name is Doug Feldman. Like, let me look at my records. And I have the records, the roster of every Jew. He's not in there. So I'm like, who is this guy? What happened? So it's a very long story, but he's date for executions in a few weeks. I think it's important for you to go and visit with him. I said, okay. So it took a few weeks to secure the permission to be able to go and visit. And I spoke to the inmate's mother, and she had told me that he didn't have a formal bar mitzvah because he was kicked out of Hebrew school as a kid. He didn't behave very well. And then he didn't behave well. And so he never really hit it off with Judaism too well. Oh, okay. So she also said, and by the way, we also want to cremate. He wants to be cremated. I go, don't tell that to Chabad rabbi. That's like a nightmare for us to hear. So I'm like, okay, so I can go visit him? Yes, but don't bring up the cremation to him. I said, okay, Scout's honor. And I had my fingers crossed when I said that. So whatever. I shouldn't say that. That's sacrilegious.
Awesome.
Anyways,
Yeah.
I had my fingers mugging up. Whatever. So anyways. So anyhow, I call the prison and I say, listen, I gotta go. I have to visit this inmate, and it has to be a contact visit. So in death row, you can't really have contact visits. What happens is a person is sitting on the other side of a glass. You're sitting on this side of a glass and you're talking through a telephone. And I said, no, I need to be able to touch him because, and then all of a sudden, I get very spiritual with these things. I feel sometimes God puts like the answer or the words in your head because how would I know it? So I said, I think that the Catholics have something called the rosary or something like that. And they do something with beads. Do you let them go in and do it with the inmates, right? And they said, yeah. So, well, this is the Jewish version. I told them, I have to go in and do it. So they said, okay, fine. You can come and do it. You have 20 minutes to do it. Okay. So I drive up to Lake Livingston, Texas to do this bar mitzvah. Now you're like, what is a bar mitzvah, Rabbi Goldstein? What do you mean? You made like a party? No. In Jewish law, the first time a man puts on tefillin in his life over the age of bar mitzvah is considered a bar mitzvah. And since he was going to put on tefillin for the first time, it's going to be his bar mitzvah. Okay, so the day comes, I drive up, I go with one of my colleagues, Rabbi Mendy, Traxler, for some emotional support, because it's a heavy situation to go into death row, and here's a guy who's scheduled to be executed at that point 3 days later. So what am I gonna how's this gonna work? And I don't even know him. So I did a kind of a wrong thing. I looked him up on YouTube and stuff before, and a bad move. Why? Because then you come in with your preconceived notions, like, oh man, I should have just winged, but it's fine. See, he was, as they say in Yiddish, he was good Meshuggah, this guy. And I'll tell you how he talked. So anyways, I get there, and they give us the barber shop in the death row. So they put this little table. He's sitting on this side of the table. I'm sitting on the other side of the table, and Rabbi Mendy is sitting next to me. And they walk him in like a dog. He has a chain around his waist. He has a chain around his hands and his chain around his feet. And they walk him in, they sit him down, and the guard says, okay, you have 20 minutes. And the guard leaves the room. And it's just me, Mendy, and this inmate. So I'm like, hi. Hi. So you're from Dallas? Yeah. I said, I grew up in Dallas. How about them Cowboys? Because I have to try to be fun. No, guys, don't get nervous. I know you're Texans fans and Oilers, but you have to know how to kick it with the guys, right? Yeah, how about the Cowboys? So we're like, okay. So listen, Rabbi, I wanted to make something straight before you start. I am not interested in Judaism. I appreciate you visiting with me. But if you're going to talk to me about religion, we're ending the visit right now. And I'm like, wow, the pressure is on. Because you know, internally for myself, I'm like, I'm a shliach of the Rebbe. The Rebbe is expecting me to fulfill my mandate to make sure that this guy is doing his mitzvah before he dies. And I can't fail. That's terrible. How could I? There's no room for failure. So I put all this pressure on myself. I don't know what to do. So I'm like, okay, we don't have to talk about it. We'll talk about other things. So we just started just blah, 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 blah. But then I started playing what I call rabbi chess with him. So I talk about blah, 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 and then sneak a word of Torah here, blah, 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 sneak something Jewish there, and tried to gauge him. He caught on, and he got mad. He slams his hands on the table, bam. He says, I told you I don't want to talk about this. I got quiet. Okay, I'm sorry. And then I broke the golden rule. I said, so what happened? How did we end up here? And he's like, oh, I'll tell you the story. And he tells me the story, and I'm going to kind of copy the way he was talking to me. So here's little innocent me, or big innocent me, sitting on one side, he's sitting on the other, and he starts his story. I was a successful accountant for a firm, and I got really pissed off at my boss one day. So I left work, and I went to a car dealership, and then it was towards night, and I got pissed off, and I took my gun out, and I started shooting the window, and I destroyed the window of this car place. And then I said, you know what, the hell with it. So then I got on my motorcycle, and I started driving down Central Expressway, and I'm driving down Central Expressway, and there's a big 18-wheeler right next to me, and he almost knocked me off the bike. So I'm like, oh my gosh, so what happened? What happened? I sped up, and I took my gun out of my pocket, and I emptied my whole magazine into the cab. I'm like, what? Yeah. I said, you killed the guy. He said, yeah, I killed that son of a... I'm like, oh my gosh. I said, but Doug, if I was going to shoot a guy, I wouldn't do it when we're both driving like 65, 70 miles an hour on a highway. Like, wouldn't the guy swerve and hit you? Rabbi, you don't know how trucks work. I said, no, enlighten me. There's this emergency switch off. So if there's like a wreck or something and there's a sudden movement, the guy hits the steering wheel hard, the whole truck shuts down. Okay, it's good to know for next time, right? So anyways, so I'm like, yeah, okay. So I said, so then what happened? He said, then I had to go get some gas. So I pulled off to another gas station, and there was one of those trucks, and they were putting the gas into the tanks, you know, to fill up the reservoir, whatever you call it. And I said, and then what happened? He said, well, that truck driver reminded me of the other one, and it pissed me off. I said, so what did you do? I took my gun out and I killed him. And this is how he's talking to me. Oh, this is so entertaining. Not. Okay, so I'm like, whoa. So then what happened? So then I went to another one, and then I pulled my gun out, but then they jumped on me, and then they arrested me, and I've been here ever since. So I looked at him in the eye, and I said, Doug, I hope I don't piss you off. And he looked at me, and he says, nah, you're a nice guy, Rabbi. I wouldn't kill you. So I was like, Baruch Hashem. I'm going to go home tonight. So I'm like, okay. So we're talking, yapping. At this point, 30 minutes, 40 minutes have gone by, and the guy hasn't come to tell me it's time up. So I go outside, and I see the guard is sound asleep. There's a couch outside of the room, and he's sleeping. And he's supposed to be watching me with this death row guy, and it's just me and him and Mendy Tracks there. Yeah, this is wonderful, man. So this is what's going on. So then, but I realized I gotta start making my case here. So I said, you know, Doug, your mother told me that you like Kabbalah. And all of a sudden his face lit up and says, Kabbalah? I love Kabbalah. I said, you love Kabbalah? What do you love so much about Kabbalah? He says, I love the Hebrew alphabet. And this is the conversation, I promise you. I said, what's your favorite letter in the alphabet? He goes, my favorite letter is Shimel. So the way I'm looking at you right now is how I looked at him. Shimel. So I'm thinking, did I miss that day in Hebrew school? So I looked at him and I go, Shimel? He goes, Shimel. I said, Shimel? Shimel. Okay, Shimel. Shimel. Like, and he goes like this with his fingers, puts 3 fingers up with his cuffs on, goes like this. Shimel! Shimel! And I said, Shin! Yeah, shin. I got confused. Nun, gibble, hey, shin. Like he starts typing the letters of the dreidel. Yeah, it's been a long time. I like the letter shin. I said, why do you like the letter shin so much? He says, because my friend told me that King David is a warrior. And on his shield, he had the letter shin. And I'm a warrior too. I said, Doug, you're a warrior? Check this out. Then I took my tefillin, unzip it, and I took the shel rosh out. I said, look at this. And he goes, that's the letter. That's the letter. I said, right, that's the letter. I said, guess what? Doug, you want to be a warrior like King David? Let's put on tefillin. And he looks at me and he goes, okay. So I'm like, thank God. So I get up, start putting on tefillin with him. But remember, he has his hands like this. So to do the tefillin, I had to unstrap the tefillin and restrap them. And while I'm doing all this, his yarmulke falls off onto the floor. And I bend down to get it. And as I'm bending down to get it, I'm like, stupid move, Rabbi, stupid move, Rabbi. Because all he had to do was like in wrestling, they call it the clothesline. All I had to do was with those chains go like this and choke me. And that's so I like jumped up and I put the yarmulke on his head. And we put on the tefillin. I said, okay, now we're going to pray. So I start singing with him, Shema Yisrael, you know? And we sang the Shema. And all of a sudden he broke down and he started to cry. And I'm like, this is like from the Hasidic fairy tales. Why? Because look at this guy. This guy is the hard criminal who is like a real jerk talking about how he kills people, doesn't want to connect to God. And then all of a sudden at that one moment when he had the tefillin on, he started saying Shema. He broke down and he started crying. And I was like, oh. And then I let him finish. And then we took the tefillin off. And then we started talking about other Jewish things. He opened up. And we talked about the concept of Jewish burial, a proper Jewish burial. And he said, you know, Rabbi, it doesn't bother me. I don't care. I just didn't want to be a burden on my family. I'm like, just take my ashes, burn them, and throw it somewhere. I said, no. It's important. You should die as a Jewish person. You'll be buried. Okay, Rabbi, I'll do it. And we just continued to talk. And then I thought to myself, I have to cut this off because the guy is coming in and he's telling me it's over. And I have to finish off. But what are you going to tell a guy on death row when you're finishing this meeting and like a couple of days later he's going to be executed? But you know, like hasta la vista, till next time. What are you going to say to him? So all of a sudden I said, you know, Moses blessed Joshua with the words, Chazak v'amatz, be strong. And as we say in Texas, keep on trucking. Someday it's going to come a time, Mashiach is going to come, and we'll all be together again. May it be very soon. Just thank you, Rabbi. I said, but before I leave, I'm going to ask you for one favor. I said, what, Rabbi? I said, I need to give you a hug. So he looked at me and he said, will it make you feel better? I said, it'll make me feel very good. He said, okay, Rabbi. And he put his head on my chest here, and I gave him like a bear hug. And he just stayed there. And he said, thank you, Rabbi. And that was it. Then the visit was over. I woke up. Day of the execution comes, and the mother calls me. She's like, Rabbi Goldstein, I'll never forget. I started trembling when I saw her phone number on my caller ID because I'm like, I spoke to him about the cremation, and he probably told her, and she's going to get on my case. So I'm like, yes, Rabbi Goldstein, I have something to tell you. I'm like, what? My son was in death row for 8 years, and they mistreated him. They beat him. They made him crazy. They gave him a terrible time. And the only person who put a loving hand on my son the whole time was you when you hugged him. And because of that, the family decided that we're giving you custody of his body after the execution. It really meant a lot to us. And thank you very much. And that was it. They executed him that night. I was able to raise some money in Houston, and the Dallas JFS, because he's from Dallas, gave the plot of land. And we took a group of guys with the Dallas people, and we had a whole nice funeral service for him up in Dallas, Texas. So he went as a Jew. And it was a very impactful thing. But just so you know, he was still very meshugget till the last moment. You can look up on the Texas Department of Criminal Justice has records of the last statement that anybody says before they execute them. They say, do you have anything you want to say? And usually they'll say, I'm sorry to the families, blah, blah, blah. They say all these things. What did this guy say? imagine this, he's on a gurney, like on a bed, strapped in. They're gonna give him 2 injections and it's lights out. And he's sitting there, and you have something to say, yeah. I, Douglas Feldman, ordered the executions of, and he starts naming the victims, and I will do it again. Then they give him the 2 shots, and that was that. What did that show you? It's a little mishuggah, but beneath all the mishuggahs, guess what was there? Spirit. He had a neshama. He has the soul. The craziness doesn't come from the soul. The craziness comes from the outer layers. And it was that clarity that I got from my religious educational upbringing that helps me be able to guide myself through these situations, to be able to connect to the people in those darkest moments. In closing, I'll show you another little quick video.
גם כעת בתוך הכלא, ימים לפני מותו, עיניו של ג'דדיה נוצצות כשהוא נזכר בפעם הראשונה שבה הניח תפילין באגף הנידונים למוות.
But it was amazing. I mean, I'd wanted to do it for so many years, and to do it and to learn how to do it and say the prayers, and it was it was a special thing. It remains so. And I've done it many times since. Ever since he broke the ice, every time they come up here, I do it every time. And I'm going to do it every time. I'm going to do it Monday.
We made a little bar mitzvah party. I went to the snack machine, got him some chips and a pickle and some soda, and we said l'chaim and celebrated his bar mitzvah, if you will.
לימים יהפוך הרב גולדסטין לאורח קבוע אצל ג'דדיה באגף הנידונים למוות, ומתברר שעד כמה שזה נדיר, יש כיום לפחות 7 אסירים יהודיים בארצות הברית שממתינים לביצוע עונש המוות שהוטל עליהם.
If you could say I made a deal with God, which I mean, I don't mean people to take it that way. You don't make deals with God. But what I told him was, if you do this for me, I will serve you. I'll serve you. I'll quit. I'll quit doing it my way, and I'll do it your way. And we'll go from there. And God wanted me to submit to his authority. I don't drink. I don't do drugs. I don't even cuss anymore. And those were things that I was known for here for years.
אנו נפרדים מג'דדיה באגף הנידונים למוות ביממה הקריטית לערעורו.
Nice to meet you, man. All right.
עזבנו את ג'דדיה בכלא בשעות הצהריים. שעה קלה אחר כך התכנסה ועדת השחרורים לדיון האחרון בעניינו. הערעור התקבל ואז נדחה ואז התקבל שוב. בקהילה היהודית עשו הכל כדי לשנות את רוע הגזרה עד לרגע האחרון. ג'דדיה נשאר אופטימי עד הסוף. במכתבו האחרון מהכלא הוא כתב: הצלחנו בבית הדין לערעורים ואיני חושב שבית המשפט העליון יתערב להפוך את החלטתם. אבל מדינת טקסס לא ויתרה וערערה שוב כדי לדאוג לכך שג'דדיה יוצא להורג. ימים ספורים אחרי הרעיון, ג'דדיה מרפי נלקח מכאן למתקן ההוצאות להורג, מרחק שעת נסיעה. כשנפגשנו הוא קיווה עדיין לערעור של הרגע האחרון שיציל את חייו, אבל גם היה לגמרי מפוקח באשר לצפוי לו.
The state of Texas executing a death row inmate last night. Jedediah.
What's the take home of all this? I have a lot more stories, and God willing, I've been working for a little while on putting a book in a more organized way to talk all these different things. But bottom line is, as I said at the beginning, we're here in the business of rehabilitating people through Yiddishkeit, through Judaism. And by doing so, it helps reduce recidivism. The people, they're not always repeat offenders. Sometimes it does happen, unfortunately, that, and I've been burned a couple of times from graduates from our program, but as many people in this community know. And but there are some success stories there as well. And the success is not always just what happens at the end, but every time a person does something good along the way, that's also a success. We have to celebrate those victories as well. Chaplaincy is more than just religious teachings, but it's also some social work and counseling as well. We have to do our grief counseling. So we have a lot of direct impact on the inmates. I had this testimony in 2010. The state of Texas was thinking to close down the chaplaincy department of TDCJ. And I'm in a unique position because I'm an employee, but I'm what they call a contracted employee. So therefore, I don't have to abide by all the rules like the full-time employees do. So I was asked to go testify at a public hearing where there was a Senate committee that was debating if they should close the chaplaincy department or not. And I remember they gave me like 2 minutes to make a statement. What am I going to do in 2 minutes, right? But it was one of those godly moments where God put the right, and it was a very weird statement that I came up with. And what I said like this, I said, dear senators, chaplaincy is, TDCJ is the body, and chaplaincy is the soul. And a soul without a body is just a piece of dead meat. I stopped. A body without a soul, a body without a soul is just a piece of dead meat. And they all looked at me. And there was this lady, the senator from Laredo, a Hispanic lady. She's like, that was very profound, Rabbi. Can you please repeat it? I want to write it down. So I was like, sure. I went back on the microphone. I said it again. And it was cute because she put it on her Facebook. She says, we were here at the testimony and the rabbi said a very profound statement about spirituality in general, that, we need to keep the chaplaincy open, which thank God they did. They figured out a way to balance their books and to keep it open, because it is a very important thing for me.
The finding is, the more programming that there is, the lower the recidivism rate is. What's our job? To guard and to keep the garden. What's the garden? Hold on, the world. Make it a better place. So always think to yourself, how can I make the world a better place from when I entered it? One of the biggest challenges I have is when an inmate gets out and there's nothing in place for him in the community. You're gonna fail and go right back in, and then we didn't gain anything. This is where a lot more talent needs to go, because the challenge is much harder.
I have never met a man that gives of themselves so selflessly as Rabbi Goldstein does.